What happens when the man you brought in to polish your truth decides your truth is too cheap to carry his name? The marble floors of the federal courtroom gleamed like a promise that justice could not be touched by the dirt everyone pretended wasn't tracked in with every footstep. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson sat tall behind the bench, her black robe crisp, her gavel an unspoken threat no one dared test until today. Denzel Washington sat at the witness table, posture easy, eyes steady under the bright lights. He'd been invited to speak on integrity, the American promise, the idea that power can stand up straight if the right words hold it steady. But behind the polite hush and the cameras whirring in the back row, there was a crack in the script. And somewhere in the silence between his breath and her next question, the room could feel it. Denzel Washington hadn't come to read lines someone else wrote. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson folded her hands over the bench, her voice warm but lined with that polished steel only a lifetime in the highest courts can give. Mr. Washington, you've spoken often about responsibility, about carrying your name with dignity. Do you believe the people sitting in this room today understand that burden? A few polite nods rippled through the gallery. Staffers, journalists, the ones who'd come for a headline they could clip into 15 safe seconds for the evening news. Denzel didn't answer right away. He let the question linger, his eyes moving across the room, settling on faces that looked down when he looked too long. He leaned forward, his hands folded lightly on the table, his voice calm enough to hush even the judge. I think a man knows his burden when he carries it alone, when he stops asking other people to hold the part that's too heavy for him. Justice Jackson's jaw tightened just a fraction, small enough to miss if you weren't watching her as closely as Denzel was. So you think some here are asking others to bear a weight they can't, she pressed. Denzel's eyes narrowed. Not cruel, not angry, just sharp enough to make the hush feel dangerous. I think some folks forgot who they were supposed to carry it for. And in that sudden stillness, the first flicker of tension cracked through the marble calm, a sign the next question might cost more than anyone at that bench expected. Justice Jackson shifted behind the bench, her fingers tapping once against the gavel that rested like a reminder she could end this whenever she wanted, or so she thought. She cleared her throat, the warmth in her voice cooling into something more formal. Mr. Washington, you're here to speak on integrity, not to lecture the court on how we do our job. A ripple moved through the gallery, a soft, uneasy sound that said they knew this wasn't the polite back and forth they'd expected. Denzel's posture never changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He just let the weight of her words hang in the air like dust caught in a beam of light. He leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. With all due respect, Your Honor, you don't invite a man to speak truth and then act shocked when he speaks it. A single gasp slipped from the front row, the kind that breaks a hush wide open. Justice Jackson's mouth tightened, but her eyes flickered toward the rows behind him, as if searching for a nod that wouldn't come. She straightened her robe, voice sharper now. You're a guest in this court, Mr. Washington. You don't get to cross-examine this bench. Denzel's lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a line drawn in the marble floor. I'm not cross-examining you, Judge. I'm asking if you remember who you serve when the robe comes off. And in that thickening silence, the room felt the crack run deeper. This was no longer testimony. It was a reckoning. Justice Jackson's fingers curled tighter around the gavel, the polished wood suddenly feeling too small to hold back the weight pressing in from every row of eyes locked on her. She forced a tight smile, the kind that works on cameras, but not on men like Denzel. Mr. Washington, this court appreciates your passion, but you will remember your place. I won't have my bench turned into a stage for cheap theatrics. Denzel's calm didn't budge. If anything, his voice dropped lower, softer, the kind of soft that makes every word land like it's being carved in stone. A bench turns into a stage the moment the people sitting in front of it feel like they're watching a performance instead of hearing the truth. A murmur slipped through the gallery. aides shifting, a reporter tapping her pen against her pad just to break the tension pressing down like a weight. Justice Jackson's jaw set, her tone cool and clipped. "And what truth do you think you're here to reveal today, Mr. Washington? You think you see something no one else does?" Denzel leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, his eyes locked on hers so firmly the hush grew thicker than any closing argument. "I see a room that forgot who it's supposed to protect. I see a robe that forgot it was never meant to shield you from the people, but to shield the people from what power can become." A sharp exhale escaped from the gallery's back row. Not outrage, not applause, just that low that says something just cut too close to spin away. And in that silence, everyone knew the next word would not belong to the gavel. Justice Jackson's lips parted like she might snap the gavel down just to stop the echo of Denzel's words from ringing in her ears. But the hush in the courtroom felt too thick to break clean. Every eye fixed on her, waiting to see if the robe would hide her or reveal her for what came next. She tried to steady her tone, but the edge slipped through anyway. "Mr. Washington, you're not an officer of this court. You don't get to question my oath." Denzel's shoulders stayed loose, his hands folding gently on the table in front of him. "Your oath isn't a crown, Your Honor. It's a mirror. You don't wear it. You stand in front of it every day and hope it still knows you." A soft gasp rippled through the front row. A single phone lifted just high enough to catch the moment everyone knew wouldn't survive the edit. Justice Jackson's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping low. "Are you accusing this bench of betrayal, Mr. Washington?" Denzel's stare never wavered, his voice so calm it pressed the truth deeper than any shout could. "No. I'm asking when you last remembered who you serve when no one's watching. Because power's a funny thing. It's loyal to the people who fear losing it, not the ones who stand up when it matters." The gavel trembled in her grip. And in that hush, you could feel it. The next crack might not just split the marble floor. It might split the mask that made this courtroom feel safe. Justice Jackson shifted back in her chair, the carved wood of the bench pressing cold against her spine, as if the very seat was reminding her that titles could feel like cages when the truth got too close. She searched Denzel's eyes for a crack, some sign that this was just performance, just righteous theater for the cameras. But there was nothing. No flinch, no tremor, just the steady gaze of a man who had carried his own name long enough to know what it cost. She cleared her throat, voice brittle at the edges. "You come into this court and question my loyalty to the people? You think you know more about justice than someone who's lived it her whole life." Denzel's head tilted, not mocking, just the faint trace of disappointment in the silence before he spoke. "Justice isn't a life you live behind a bench, Judge. It's a choice you make when the bench gets too comfortable. When the people paying the price for your comfort don't get to walk away and forget the verdict." A murmur rolled through the rows. Not loud, not angry, just that heavy, slow realization that they were no longer watching a hearing, but something raw enough to feel like confession. Justice Jackson's fingers trembled on the gavel, the polished wood now useless to stop what was coming next. "Mr. Washington, you're out of line." Denzel's voice cut through, calm and clear as a bell ringing in a cathedral no one remembered how to keep silent. "Then draw the line again. And ask yourself if you remember who you serve when you draw it." And in that hush, so still you could hear every breath, the first tear welled at the corner of her eye. Justice Jackson blinked hard, willing that single tear back behind the calm mask she had worn for years, the same mask that made the cameras love her, the headlines praise her, the system wrap itself tighter around her shoulders like a cloak she never thought she'd have to take off. She steadied her voice, but it broke in the middle anyway. "Mr. Washington, I don't answer to you. I answer to the law." Denzel's eyes softened for the first time. Not pity, not scorn, just the weight of a man who had spent his life watching power forget its own promises. "The law doesn't sit on that bench alone, Judge. The people put it there. And the people can take it back if they ever remember it's theirs to hold." A woman in the gallery pressed a hand to her chest, her phone catching the moment the hush grew too big for the marble walls to contain. Justice Jackson glanced at her clerk, as if the young man could save her from the truth crawling up her throat. But his eyes were down, the page before him blank. Denzel leaned forward, his voice dropping so low the whole room leaned with it. You think that robe is iron? It's paper. It tears the second you forget who you're wearing it for. Justice Jackson's lips trembled around the word she could not speak. Why? But the hush gave her no place to hide it. And in that heavy stillness, everyone knew the next word would not be hers to shape. The old clock on the far wall ticked louder than any voice in the room, each second stretching the hush until it felt like it might crack the marble pillars clean through. Justice Jackson's fingers curled tight around the gavel, but she didn't raise it. She just held it like a talisman, hoping its weight might hold her together. Her breath came shallow, words trembling free before she could swallow them back. You think this is easy, Mr. Washington? You think standing up here means I never question what I owe the people who trusted me? Denzel didn't blink, didn't lean back, didn't offer the mercy of an easy answer. No, Judge. I think you questioned it once. Maybe every day when the cameras weren't rolling. But you forgot the question the second you let power answer it for you. A low hum rippled through the gallery. Not outrage, not pity, just that raw, slow murmur that says the truth finally showed up in a room that had forgotten what to do with it. Justice Jackson's eyes glistened now, her voice cracking under the weight of her own robe. So what do you want from me, Mr. Washington? An apology? A confession? Denzel's head shook, slow and solemn. I want nothing. It's not my truth to fix. It's yours to remember, and theirs to hold you to when this bench stops feeling so safe. The gavel slipped in her grip, hitting the wood with a dull thud that no one mistook for a verdict. And in that stillness, the echo that mattered wasn't the strike. It was the question that now hung in every mind in that room. Justice Jackson's shoulders hunched just slightly, a small break in the regal posture that had made her bench feel untouchable for so long. Her eyes darted over the courtroom like she might find a corner where this moment hadn't already taken root, but every face stared back unflinching, every phone screen catching the truth she could not tuck behind her robe anymore. Her voice came out raw, stripped of the polish that once made it sound so certain. And what if you're wrong, Mr. Washington? What if the people don't care? What if they'd rather stay blind than see who we really are behind this bench? Denzel's eyes softened, a flicker of that quiet grace that made every word feel twice as heavy. Then you remind them. You show them your cracks before they show you theirs. You stand up here and carry their disappointment on your shoulders, not just their praise. A single sob slipped from the second row, someone covering their mouth too late to stop the sound. The gavel rested useless under her trembling palm. The hush felt like it might crush the air out of the room. Justice Jackson's lips parted, the words barely a whisper. It's not that simple. Denzel leaned forward, his voice steady as an old hymn. It never is. That's why you asked for this robe. Not to protect you, to remind you every day who you serve when the lights go out. And in that hush, thick as a final truth, a single tear rolled down her cheek. But the next words would not be his. They would belong to the roar waiting just outside that marble wall. Justice Jackson sat frozen behind her bench, the robe draped around her shoulders like a weight she could no longer lift alone. The tears slipped free, tracing a line down the side of her face that the cameras caught in full. No edit, no spin. The hush in the courtroom seemed to breathe with her, like the people leaning forward were holding her secret just long enough for her to finally let it go. Denzel Washington didn't gloat. He didn't rise. He just sat there, eyes calm, voice warm enough to feel like the gentlest judgment the truth could offer. This robe doesn't make you bigger than the people, Judge. It makes you their servant. It always did. You just forgot who you were wearing it for. A ripple moved through the gallery. First a single clap, then another, not loud, not wild, but real. The echo of a truth that had slipped past the marble, and settled into the people who had come to see if their voice still mattered in a place built to keep it quiet. Justice Jackson pressed her trembling fingers to her lips, the gavel resting on the bench untouched. No ruling could bury what she'd heard, and everyone in that room knew it. Denzel's final words slipped into the hush like a promise that didn't need to shout. Power is loyal to the people brave enough to carry it without armor. Remember that, or the people will remember for you. When he stood, the hush held, not to celebrate him, but to feel what he'd left behind. One question that would echo far beyond that room. Do you remember who you serve? And for once, the bench did not answer. The people did.